Hello class, and welcome to this Marble Madness NES walkthrough / guide right here on Video Games 101 by way of Let's Play with Brigands. I'm your instructor, Professor Brigands, and always loved this game as a kid. So much fun to just pick up and play. It's such a fun premise. I could play 50 levels with this gameplay. Marble Madness has 6, but we do have tips designed to get you through to the end. Yes, gratifyingly, this game does indeed have a definitive end. Not an ending necessarily, but still. But it is tricky to get to said end, especially if you're new to or out of practice with this game. It's one of those games, again, it's easy to pick up, difficult to master. So, in terms of difficulty, I'm going to give Marble Madness on a scale of 1 to 10 a 6 out of 10, which on the frustration scale equates to biting down and then throwing your controller across the room, probably because you were within a marble's length of that finish line on the ultimate race, the final race, before time ran out. That certainly warranted that kind of response. I'm sure I had that response quite a few times as a kid, but we've got all the tips to get you across that literal finish line. Fluff has a number of interesting facts about this game, the development, just a lot of things I didn't know before this class. And Blaze is going to talk about the controls at the top, or something very specific as it relates to Marble Madness. So let's run that intro and get into this Marble Madness NES walkthrough right here on Video Games 101. Alright, so after you choose your number of players, you'll be presented with the option to choose 90 or 45 degree controls. And with an explanation of how that affects your marble, let's go to Blaze.
It's Blaze's best here in Item Sky. Alright, at the start you have the choice between 90 degrees and 45 degrees for your marble. If you choose 90 degrees, the controls will handle as you would expect. Up is up, down is down, and so on. Should you choose the 45 degree option, I guess this being an isometric kind of game, it more fits in line with that. The way to interpret this is everything gets shifted clockwise one position. I recommend 90 degrees, that's how I roll, no pun intended, but there you go, the difference between 90 and 45 here in Marble Madness.
Thank you, Blaze. We're going to stick with 90 degrees, but yeah, don't fault anyone for going 45 degrees. There's no straightaways which go up, down, left, right. With this being isometric, everything is going down and to the right, down and to the left, and so on. But we are sticking with 90 degrees ourselves. So this first course is the practice course. The amount of time you complete this in has no bearing on anything else. Later on in the game, every time that we beat a course, the amount of seconds we have left on the clock will be applied to our next race. So this is the time to catch your breath, figure out what's going on, figure out the controls. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the controls for Marble Madness. Incredibly simple. The movement has the asterisk because it depends on whether you went 45 or 90, so Blaze already covered that. We can pause the game to start and hold down A to initiate turbo. There's no limit to how much turbo you can use in this game, but speaking of turbo, let's take a look at the Briggs notes. These are the keys to beating this game for this Marble Madness NES walkthrough. First, slow and steady like most racing games on the NES. Take your time going around corners. Do not use turbo when you're going into corners, when you're making turns. And that's Briggs note number 2. Alternate on and off responsibly and effectively. And lastly, know how to deal with obstacles and traps. That's what we're covering from here on out, trying to beat these subsequent races as quickly as possible, starting with beginner race. I like to go left to right for the start right there, holding down A for that straightaway down the ramp. Avoiding these baddies, waiting for that ramp to drop down. You can either go left here or take the little chute. I like the chute, it's a little bit faster, but gotta have a little bit of pace coming into get over some of the hills right there in that little section. It's a little tricky. Here I like to hug the top of this little area right here, and I find if you hit it just like that, you can get through without dropping off, being deposited into that pit, which will just send you back to where you died, essentially. But made that first race in good time. Now we are On to the second race, not using turbo yet. Now we're going to apply it right here. Take the top route to avoid the dissolving slime right there, the acid. Drop it down. We have another junction here. See, don't lose anything for going off the edge, just a little slowdown, but I like to take the shortcut there, going on the green, applying that turbo, and then taking it off when you're making that right turn to dismount, and then saves you some time there. There's some vacuums at the start of this one. You can avoid them by staying more at the bottom of the track, but let's turbo through here. We got some random extra time that happens every now and then at random, if you're lucky. I like to come in at the top there on the right and just push straight right as we're turboing to get down that ramp safe. Here you just want to pull back a little bit, wait for the little french fry pistons to pop out, and then come in hard and fast. And if you get lucky with the timing, that's random, you'll get through unscathed. Here I like to drop off and just hold up and to the left with 90-degree controls and just hold that turbo button, and after one or two tries, sometimes the first try you'll get lucky, you'll make it across, and pretty much the best way to do that. Again, a lot of luck goes into it, like most aspects of this game. The Everything You Know Is Wrong track right here. Any Weird Al fans out there, by the way? So yeah, these straightaways, just make sure you have a nice clean line and then apply the turbo. Run over these two mini marbles right there to grab plus 3 seconds each time. This is where we need to build up a little bit of momentum because we have more of these little grades here, little slopes. And just follow this track right here. Mind these missiles, bird missiles, whatever you want to call these. These will destroy your marble and just, eat up some time. So just find your opening right there. Turbo as opportunely as possible there. But 56 seconds carried over to the ultimate race. And you might need every last one of those, as they only give you 20 seconds to start the ultimate race here. But so come a little bit to the left here to make sure you have enough speed to turbo up that hill right there, drop in. If we're one player, we're going to be right here on the right side. Always make sure you're going straight when you hit that ice. Careful, this is very slippery, this disco-looking floor here. And again, pull back to the very top of that ice right there to give yourself a little momentum, as once you're on the ice, you can't control your speed or directions. And here it's just about patience. I'm not exercising patience here because I'm going for the gold, but 49 seconds to spare. We just beat Marble Madness, and that's more than good enough to dismount Sweep, who we referenced on the whiteboard in this one. And you can see how they tally up your score here, but we more than doubled Sweep, I believe. How about that? Topping off the high rollers. All right, so that it's a very short game. Again, I rented this game. It amuses me, the idea, as I rename myself Prof instead of VG1. See if we can beat that time. The idea of renting this game that you can beat if you know what you're doing, in about 4 or 5 minutes. It's so fast. Let's see if I can beat this before Fluff finishes telling us some interesting facts about Marble Madness in the second run here. Fluff, what do you got for us?
Marble Madness is a 1989 rare-developed port of the 1984 arcade game of the same name, designed by then 18-year-old Mark Kearney for Atari Games Incorporated. Kearney dropped out of University of California, Berkeley at 17 after accepting an invitation to join and develop for Atari. Taking gameplay inspiration from miniature golf and racing games, and being graphically influenced by the mathematical, geometrical-themed artistic works of Dutch graphic artist M.C. Escher, Kearney applied a minimalistic design to the game half out of necessity, as the limitations of the technology forced him to abandon many of his design ideas. While the oftentimes ineffective ported controls were criticized amongst many of the dozen or so ports the game experienced across computer systems and consoles of the late 80s and early 90s, the original arcade version allowed players to control the marble via a trackball, a design which was featured amongst a couple dozen arcade titles in the years preceding Marble Madness's release, like Centipede and Missile Command. Marble Madness was notable for being the first arcade game to make use of the Atari System 1 hardware, to be programmed in the C programming language, and use an FM sound chip, which created the in real-time synchronization with the game's action on screen. It was also one of the first arcade games to feature true stereo sound, with most games at the time being either mono or simulating their stereo effect. Professor, you mentioned in the opening how you would have liked some more levels to be featured.
Yeah.
While the game was a commercial and critical success upon its release in 1984, one criticism was its brevity, as the game was able to be beaten by a skilled player in just a few minutes. Kearney's intent was to design more courses, but time and lingering financial constraints at Atari, hanging over from the previous year's infamous video game crash of 1983, meant that the game needed to be made and shipped as it was, with only 6 courses. With that in mind, a sequel to Marble Madness was actually planned and designed in the late 80s, and while Kearney wasn't involved in its development, the developers kept that criticism of the first game in mind, and created roughly 3 times as many courses for the follow-up. The developers added a superhero element to the game's quote-unquote protagonist, and gave players new abilities like invisibility and flight, even adding in capabilities for a 3rd player. Prototypes of the Marble Madness 2 cabinet were rolled out in 1991 to a handful of testing locations, but versions of the cabinet with both trackballs as well as one with joysticks to control the action were equally met with a poor reception. Atari largely attributed this to the fact that Street Fighter II had recently debuted and was beating up the competition in arcades around the globe, pun intended, causing Atari to shelf the game in favor of focusing on their own beat-em-up, 1992's forgettable Guardians of the Hood. For what it's worth, while the roughly dozen prototypes for Marble Madness 2 are now considered to be collector's items, a ROM for the joystick-controlled version of the cabinet finally surfaced in 2022.
There you go. Anyone play that? Almost beat him. Almost beat Fluff. Learned a whole lot about this game, but this is more the way you should approach this. Wait until you see that first piece of the bridge assemble in front of you, and then go. In all cases, that'll give you the most time to make sure that you get around, because the best way to make sure that you screw up your game here in the end is to panic, force moves that you wouldn't normally make, you know. I mean, if you know you got 10 seconds shown, you can't help it in that case. But destroyed our first score, though, feeling pretty good about that. But you just take your time there. I mean, it's a good lesson right there in the end, in the ultimate race, in that bridge section, hardest part of the game. But it's a good lesson for the entire game overall. But that is our time this week, short as it was. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to enroll in Video Games 101. We do one of these classes every single week in the same spot, typically on a more substantial game, but love to have you enrolled. Click that like button too if you don't mind. Really does help us out to make future classes for you, and leave a comment. Did you love this game as much as I did as a kid? But yeah, there you go. That's our time. We'll see you next week in the same spot for next week's class, right here on Video Games 101. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and comment on this video, and click subscribe if you haven't already, as this seriously helps me to keep making great content for you. And check the description of this video to see what song is playing right now.